What is going on, everyone? Welcome into the top 5 of my deep dive series, where we are breaking down all 32 teams leading up to my number 1 ranked team in my power rankings. Today, the Bills come in again with big Super Bowl expectations, though this year they aren't the gambling favorites to win the Super Bowl as they were last year, and probably a few more questions this time around than last year. So, gonna be an interesting one. First things first, though, the first person to correctly guess the order of our remaining 4 teams in the comments down below is going to win a little TFG t-shirt from my merchandise store. So drop those predictions down below. I will announce the winner on Twitter and try to find you here on YouTube, I guess. But have at it. While you're down there, do make sure you hit that like button. It really does help me out. It takes just a second. And consider subscribing if you enjoy. But without further ado, let's get into the deep dive, starting as always with the offseason, taking a look position by position where the Bills got better, worse, or stayed neutral. And that's going to start with the coaching staff, and really the main change here is Leslie Frazier, their defensive coordinator, is going to step away from the team. I'm going to leave this one as neutral. Sean McDermott, a defensive mind, I think can handle the defense without Leslie Frazier, so not terribly worried about it. Just going to say neutral on that one. Same with the quarterback room, staying neutral. They're swapping backups, Case Keenum for Kyle Allen. They've got an Allen QB room now. Then with the running back room, there is a bunch of change here. Ultimately, I'm going to have this as neutral. The main thing here is swapping Devin Singletary for Damian Harris. Pretty close to a push there, though different style backs. They also are going to lose Nyheim Hines for the season, an unfortunate camp injury. You know, they do have James Cook there, so not horribly worried about it. And then they add some extra depth in Latavius Murray. So going to say neutral on the running back room there, though it is a bunch of new names. At tight end, obviously upgraded. They spent a first-round pick on Dalton Kincaid. At wide receiver, I am going to go ahead and leave this one as neutral, though the addition of Deontay Hardy does fascinate me as a replacement in that gadget role for Isaiah McKenzie, who's going to leave here. They also bring in Trent Sherfield and Justin Shorter in the 5th round of the draft. So staying neutral at wide receiver. And then offensive line, I'm going to say upgraded. They do say goodbye to starting left guard Roger Saffold, as well as quasi-starter David Kessenberry at tackle, but they do bring in Osiris Torrance in the 2nd round. Connor McGovern gets a decent contract from the Dallas Cowboys to be the replacement for Roger Saffold, a minor upgrade there, if not a good upgrade. And then David Edwards as well, a fascinating free agent pickup. So I like some of the moves they made on the offensive line. They do still have some questions there, though, that we'll see later on in the video. As far as the defense is concerned, just some minor tweaks and adjustments for the most part. Interior defensive line I have as slightly upgraded. They didn't really lose anybody and bring in Poona Ford, who's going to rotate there. Then on the edge, this one is going to be a big wild card for the Bills team as a whole. They trade away Boogie Basham. He basically didn't make the team. They send him to the Giants in a trade recently. And then they bring in Leonard Floyd. You know, that so much doesn't really bother me. That's a push/slight upgrade, but what they get from Von Miller this year is really going to determine if the edge group is quote-unquote upgraded from what they had last year. Obviously, got hurt mid-season last year, wasn't available for their playoff run, and now on the flip side, this time around, he's going to start the season on the PUP, and we don't know what he's going to give them through this season. So that's going to be a big wild card for them, leaving that as to be determined depending on Von Miller's health. At linebacker, this one's got to be downgraded. Tremaine Edmonds gets that massive free agent contract from the Chicago Bears. The only thing they really did to replace that is 3rd round pick Dorian Williams, who I liked, but does not look like he's going to be starting to start the year. And then at cornerback, slight upgrade because they should be getting a full season of Tre'Davious White, who was available for the back third of the year last year or so into the playoffs. Likewise, at safety, getting upgraded because they add Micah Hyde to the room who got hurt in week 2 of last year. They also go ahead and put in Taylor Rapp from the Rams. So big upgrades really to that safety room from what they had last year. And then kicker punter is going to stay the same. So a nice offseason, nothing too crazy. This team was in a good spot last year, obviously, as the Super Bowl favorites, and not a ton of shakeup as you might expect. But let's now take a look at this coaching staff, how they stack up against the rest of the league. And I'm going to be honest, I'm souring on the idea of Sean McDermott as head coach for the Bills. And, you know, I've had Bills fans on one hand agree with me about this take. I've had other Bills fans come at me about this take. And there's no denying that Sean McDermott is a good NFL head coach, right? I rank him as the 17th head coach in the NFL, and he deserves a ton of credit for coming into a Bills organization that were bottom feeders and needed to restore the roster, restore the culture, and he deserves credit for getting them to where they are now. And you know, when it comes to leadership and being the CEO of the team and steering the ship in the right direction, if you will, he's great at that. And that's reflected in my team culture rankings, where the Bills are in that second tier, which is roughly top 10 in the NFL. But what I question is Sean McDermott the right coach to get this team that now, with an elite quarterback, has legit Super Bowl aspirations to their final goal? I just wonder if Sean McDermott has capped out a little bit as the Bills head coach. And I say that because on one hand, he's a defensive head coach. And we've talked about this ad nauseum throughout this series and over the last few years, that you're just kind of putting a cap on yourself in this offensive-minded league by having a defensive-minded head coach. Number one, it's great to have a offensive guru that can elevate your offense. But number two, the second you find a great offensive mind, a guy like Brian Daboll here, the Bills witnessed this firsthand, he's gone. He's going to go get a job elsewhere, and if you're lucky, a guy like Brian Daboll will stay an extra year. So it's not like you can't have a great coaching staff window with a defensive-minded head coach, but it's going to close pretty quickly. And the Bills are suffering that right now after they saw Brian Daboll leave the building. We see what he's doing for the Giants. He was a special coach, and just like when the Niners chose Dan Quinn over Kyle Shanahan, well, I see a lot of similarities here. But it's not just that. You know, I've said this before. If you're going to have a defensive-minded head coach, he better be frickin' Mike Vrabel, Bill Belichick. You better feel damn sure that he is one of the 5 to 10 best defensive minds in the NFL. And do I feel that way about Sean McDermott? Do I feel like he's a better defensive coordinator than that large chunk of good defensive minds that are in defensive coordinator positions? No, I don't. At no point have the Bills had a fear factor of a defense, especially when you get to January. They still feel soft and just okay on that side of the ball. They've had roster talent. You don't feel Sean McDermott elevating the guys on this roster in the way that guys like DeMeco Ryans have for the Niners or Mike Vrabel for the Titans. And while it's great to have someone that is an amazing leader of men and a great just kind of overall lead by example standard for the locker room, how far can that go when you are trying to win a Super Bowl? You're not trying anymore to be the 13th best team in the NFL like you might have been when you hired Sean McDermott. You are now trying to be the best team in the NFL. And I just worry that they're reducing their chances at being the best team with a coach like Sean McDermott. And he's a good NFL head coach. Like I said, he would get hired in a heartbeat if they fired him. But I do beg the question, if they don't win a Super Bowl this year, is it time to maybe have a transition season with the head coach? So in my mind, I'm putting Sean McDermott on the hot seat. It probably won't happen. It's a human element involved here. But by the way, McDermott is taking over as the full-time defensive coach here, so he does in a way have an opportunity to show what he really has to offer with the full reins of this defense, with Leslie Frazier stepping away. I'm fascinated to see how that goes, and I'm open-minded that maybe he can finally turn this into a dominant defense. As far as the scheme that he runs, it's very much that kind of Fangio influence in the same way that Ron Rivera has run it in Washington, where it's not necessarily that 3-4 Fangio tree with a, stand-up edge front, if you will. But in terms of the coverage calls, it's very Fangio-inspired. A ton of quarters, quarter, half, that kind of pattern-matching off-zone coverage on the back end. But the main difference there is McDermott, like Ron Rivera, is much more of a four-man front-oriented coach. You're going to see a lot more stunts and a little bit more blitzing and a little bit more man coverage. It's a good scheme if run correctly. So again, I have the Bills in that tier 3 of defensive coaching, which is categorized as good, but does rank anywhere from 14th to 29th. Like I said, there's a bunch of good defensive coordinators in the league. It's another reason to go with an offensive-minded head coach. It's not terribly difficult to find an Ejiro Evero or something like that to run your defense. But as far as the offensive coaching is concerned with Ken Dorsey here, also in that tier 3, categorized as good, more in the middle of the league there. It just felt like this was Brian Daboll's offense with the dials turned down about 10%. The scheme was the same. It was a ton of shotgun, inside zone runs, out of shotgun, a lot of QB runs, which I was really glad that they didn't take that out of the playbook with Brian Daboll leaving. That's, similar use of that staple passing concept. I don't know the name of the concept, but the Bills run it all the time, where you've got usually like an alert going really deep and then usually two crossers kind of almost like, giving each other a high five about 15 yards down the field, really stressing that deep to intermediate part of the game. And, Josh Allen has learned how to make those throws and read that area of the field out so well. They still used all the same stuff that Brian Daboll had here, but in terms of pushing the right buttons at the right time, the pacing of everything, the game management side of things, it just didn't all feel the same with Brian Daboll. Or as it did with Brian Daboll. It felt like a lot more in crunch time. They just kind of said, Josh Allen, go make shit happen. And a lot of times he's able to do that. But I'm not concerned about the offensive coaching. They kind of had that succession plan in place here. But Ken Dorsey certainly has not proved out to be the offensive guru that I view Brian Daboll as. So tier 3 for both pass game and run game coaching. Overall, this is a good coaching staff, but not one that I'm thrilled or raving about. It's just good, kind of middle of the league across the board. But is that enough? We'll see. But before we get into the roster breakdown here, I got to tell you guys about the sponsor for today's video, Underdog Fantasy. The season is just around the corner, which means their pick'em contests are about to hit full force with the NFL regular season starting. I'm sure you guys have seen the screenshots of people sharing their underdog slips where you string together anywhere from 2 to 5 players, where you're selecting player stats, anything from fantasy points, passing yards, rushing touchdowns, you name it. You pick higher or lower based on the numbers that Underdog sets. And you can win up to 20 times your money if you go 5 for 5 there. It's not just big payouts, though. This is the best way to increase your interest in any given, crappy Thursday night football game, or you want the full Sunday football slate. You can get that too. I'll be playing Underdog every single day that there is football going on this season. I can guarantee you that. So you guys are going to love Underdog. And right now, if you sign up at Underdog using promo code TFG, not only will you support my channel and this series, but they will match up to $100 on that first deposit. That is easily a full season's worth of extra pick'em lineups there. So that is promo code TFG at Underdog Fantasy, and good luck. Let's get back into it. But now it's time to dive into this roster where we're going to rank each position group, how they stack up against the rest of the league. And that's going to start with the quarterback room, where the Buffalo Bills rank 3rd in the NFL. Josh Allen in that elite tier of quarterback. And it was so fun after prepping film for every team in this series, having to get through the, with all due respect to these quarterbacks, the Desmond Ritters of the world, and Derek Carrs of the world, you name it. It's just so fun to go see a guy like Josh Allen play again, and just gets me fired up for the start of the season here in a week, honestly. Like, I've had this take for a couple of years now, and it's maybe changing with Anthony Richardson coming into the NFL now, but I've been saying Josh Allen is the most physically gifted quarterback that the NFL has ever seen. The combination of size, speed, strength, and most importantly, arm talent, where in my lifetime, I've never seen a quarterback with the raw arm strength of Josh Allen. Some people swear by guys like Dan Marino and John Elway, so we'll just have to say he's up there with those guys. But in terms of the last 25 years, I'm taking Josh Allen's arm over everybody else. I mean, you see that snow game against Miami, and he's hitting 20-yard out routes from the opposite hash in a blizzard without a sweat. Like, he can just do things with his arm and with his legs that nobody in the NFL can do. Arguably even Patrick Mahomes, especially when you get into like some of the crazy shit he can do with his legs at his size. He's faster than Mahomes. He's a lot bigger than Mahomes. He can, the way he stiff arms potential sackers and then gets on the move and can hurdle a defensive back or hit a 40-yard bomb. Like, there's no denying that when Josh Allen is on, he is the best quarterback in the NFL, and that's saying a lot because Patrick Mahomes is possibly the best quarterback ever. But there is a caveat there, and that is when Josh Allen is on, there's just inconsistencies in his game. And I don't want to drone on about it because it's so well covered at this point, but he does put the ball in harm's way a lot because he can do all this crazy shit. And I don't know if he's ever going to find that perfect balance in the way that maybe guys like Aaron Rodgers or more so like maybe Mahomes has, in terms of staying aggressive while not putting the ball in harm's way a little bit too much for your liking. And with Allen, it's like, there's 4 or 5 games a year where he's putting his team in compromising situations, a few too many turnovers, sometimes some accuracy issues show up. He's an imperfect, perfect quarterback, and it's a beautiful thing to watch. Yeah, it might make you a little bit more skeptical in terms of can he put together a stretch of 4 straight elite playoff performances and put the team on his back to win a Super Bowl. Like, sure, that could be a criticism of him, but, the hope is you get a little, like, if he has a bad game, you get a little lucky and the run game's working or the defense steps up that week. It just hasn't all been there for this Bills team in January for Josh Allen to get that Super Bowl that he all so much deserves. Just sit back, grab a bag of popcorn. Bills fans, don't throw too much of it on the field when you're celebrating Josh Allen touchdowns, and enjoy the spectacle that is Josh Allen. I'm not going to get into the QB debate. Is he better than Burrow? Is he better than Mahomes? I think the other guys' consistency at this point in time does set Allen ahead of them, but it's not that big of a deal. I have Josh Allen as an elite quarterback, and let's just wrap it up by saying the Bills would not finish as a top 10 team even without Josh Allen here, with just an average NFL quarterback. He is the paramount reason for why the Bills are Super Bowl contenders. As far as the backup room goes, they bring in Kyle Allen, who got some starts for Carolina back when Cam Newton was struggling to stay healthy. Adequate backup, maybe could buy you a win, keep your season alive, but if anything serious happens to Josh Allen, this season's done. So again, 3rd ranked quarterback room in the NFL for the Buffalo Bills. But then we've got the weaponry here, which is also top 10, exactly that, 10th in the NFL. And Stephon Diggs at the top of things. It's pretty funny. The last 2 videos, we've been busy comparing guys like Garrett Wilson and CeeDee Lamb to Stephon Diggs. I think both those guys received Stephon Diggs comps from me coming out, but they're hoping to become that tier 1 elite alpha receiver that Stephon Diggs is. He is the true complete package, the speed, the run after catch, the route running, which is top 5 in the league. And what really, I would say, impresses me the most about Stephon Diggs is how good he is with his hands and his body control and ability to really make difficult catches especially on some of those just Josh Allen lasers that just stick to his gloves like glue with strong hands. He's a true hands catcher when he needs to be. I love the way that he elevates for the ball as well and can come down with some of those tough 50-50 balls. And he took even another step last year, I think, in terms of really establishing that high-end chemistry with Josh Allen, where, sitting down in zones or connecting on a back shoulder or making slight adjustments based on the coverage to really make these high difficulty, rare completions that you only see between the Mahomes and Kelce's, the Burrow and Jamar Chase. I think Mike Williams and Justin Herbert have started to build some of this. Like, when you have two great football minds working together for a couple years, you start to kind of see things the same way and make these subtle adjustments that are really difficult to explain in a video like this. But when you watch them play, you can tell it's there. So that's only continued to make this a special football relationship, if you will. And that's a big reason why I never bought into any of these trade rumors. It's like they cannot break this up, and both these guys know that. So I don't know what's going on off the field this offseason, but I expect these guys to be clicking yet again as one of these elite, truly elite quarterback wide receiver combinations. And that's obviously a big reason why they rank top 10 in weaponry, because the rest of this group is solid, but nothing truly special. And a big reason I say that is because Gabe Davis, their number 2 wide receiver, didn't really take that step that we were hoping to see last year, going from a good perimeter, maybe third option in a passing game, to being that real reliable high-end number 2 guy. And after flashing the ability to maybe be that guy at the end of the 2021 season, it was definitely disappointing to see him just be a lot more inconsistent last season, and really ultimately didn't earn a contract extension that was almost expected, that he would have a really big year and kind of solidify himself as that locked in number 2 here. And it was drops. It was not consistently using his size to win those difficult catches on the outside. And on top of that, he had a little bit of an injury that did slow him down. So maybe this is the year, in a contract year now, that he can become, say, I don't know, it's not a perfect comp, but somewhere between where like Devontae Parker and Mike Williams are. I think that would be plenty for Gabe Davis. But right now, with what he showed last year, you're a little skeptical that he's enough as a wide receiver too. Herbert's got his Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. Burrow's obviously got his guys. Jalen Hurts has freaking A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. You know what I'm saying? Like, it really helps to have a second guy that doesn't need to be Stephon Diggs, but definitely needs to be more than Gabe Davis is in terms of reliability and consistency. So it's a big year for Gabe Davis. I was even a little bit surprised that they didn't go out and, throw another name in the ring here, maybe a guy like Cedric Tillman or something like that. But obviously they're confident that Gabe Davis can get the job done, and that's going to be a big deal this year, what he looks like. And I'm kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out. I don't really know what he's going to be in terms of his upside this year. The highs are definitely there, though, and we'll see. But I will say one of the really sneaky good signings that any team made this offseason was Deontay Hardy, formerly known as Deontay Harris. If you have no idea who this guy is, you may have remembered him a couple years ago for the New Orleans Saints, freaking balling out, man. He's one of these 5'8" uber quick receivers that doesn't have a big catch radius, not going to win a bunch of tough catches or anything, but you put him in an offense where he can play in space, use his route running, his speed, his separation ability. He's kind of like a juiced up version of what they've had in Elijah McKenzie. And in the small sample size Hardy had with New Orleans a couple years ago, he was one of the highest graded wide receivers in PFF. Like, he was ultra efficient, a small school guy that had some off-field issues that kind of left him off a lot of teams' radar. But the talent here is insane, and I like this pickup a lot. Would feel better about it if Brian Dable was here, because when Dable left, McKenzie wasn't quite as good. But Still, that role theoretically still exists in this offense, and I definitely have my eyes on him if he's playing a lot. He's someone I've been targeting as like a last-round flyer on Underdog or in my fantasy drafts. I think you look at the fact that there's not a lot of other receivers here and the fact that he should have some pretty explosive weeks, and he could be an interesting fantasy option and of course, an impact for this passing game, giving them a little bit of an option that they don't have with the speed and route running in the short to intermediate game. So we'll see what he can do. But I think as long as we're talking about the wide receivers, we honestly have to talk about Dalton Kincaid probably as this team's wide receiver 3. They kind of surprised a lot of people when they spent a first-round pick on Dalton Kincaid, considering they have Dawson Knox being paid as a good tight end here. But Dalton Kincaid is much more wide receiver than he is tight end. In fact, his blocking was his biggest criticism coming out of Utah. But it makes more sense when you see him come to here, a spread offense that has witnessed Travis Kelce shred them week in, week out, and they want their own Travis Kelce. It was a common pro comp for Dalton Kincaid, just in the way that he kind of sits down in zone coverages, the way he shakes linebackers, how good he is with his hands. Likewise with Kelce, who plays most of his snaps as a wide receiver, I expect that with Dalton Kincaid. And the fit makes total sense. I think his blocking will even be pretty good on screens and stuff for guys like Diggs and Hardy. You know, he can't block linebackers and defensive ends all that well, but slot corners, yeah, he should be able to body them because he's at least willing. It's just he's not very strong. My pro comp for him was Zach Ertz, and if they're getting Zach Ertz in his prime here, that's a difference-making tight end. So we're going to have to kind of wait and see how much they want to use him, how good he truly is. There's obviously a pretty bad track record of first-round tight ends making an impact, and you're going to be a little bit skeptical that they're going to figure this all out as the season goes on because Dalton Knox is there. But at least heading into the year, I would say Dalton Kincaid will lead be their third leading snap getter at wide receiver. It'll be at slot wide receiver most of the time, but I think you got to kind of talk about him that way. And when you look at him from that lens, maybe he can be that number 2 wide receiver next to Stephon Diggs, and Gabe Davis can be the number 3. That's pretty high expectations, but I think that's in the realm of possibilities in year 1 for him to really be that good, because his tape was incredible at Utah. As far as the rest of the wide receivers here, Trent Sherfield, you know, he's an interesting player. He's big, at least like he's thick, he's strong. He's one of the best run blocking receivers in the NFL. He showed off his speed in Miami at times. He's a good backup to have. He's a useful player as a wide receiver 4. Khalil Shakir still here. Crafty slot receiver with a little bit of a lack of explosiveness. My high-end comp for him coming out was Golden Tate, so we'll kind of see if he can take snaps from Deontay Hardy, how that sort of plays out with him and Kincaid as that slot wide receiver. It's crowded. It's going to be tough for him, but he made some plays when called upon last year. And then Justin Shorter, a 5th-round pick for them, big-bodied. You know, he was sort of their threat to Gabe Davis, if you will. Similar skill set, big, fast, strong guy. Had some flashes at Florida. I'm not a huge believer, but the traits are there. And that kind of rounds out your wide receiver room. Then you got to talk about Dawson Knox as well, who's going to be more of their inline tight end, especially with Kincaid there. I think as long as those two are healthy, Knox really won't be playing a lot of slot wide receiver at all. But he himself is a good player. He's got speed at the tight end position. He's a solid blocker. He's a full-sized guy. He got that contract, and, you know, with where the tight end market is at, he's well worth it. You know, the big knock on him is he doesn't have a good contested catch win rate. He's just not as consistent with his hands as you'd like to see. Was not a productive guy coming out of college, and just maybe a little bit of a lack of instincts and consistency as a receiving threat, but still an overall good tight end, and is still going to kind of chip into Dalton Kincaid's workload, and they're going to have to manage how these guys play, but he's still a good player to have. And you got Quentin Morris, still kind of a developmental tight end there. Made a couple plays last year, but they are hoping not to see a ton of him because that would mean injuries have occurred. But then you got James Cook at running back, and he projects as one of these legit, like, real weapons out of the backfield. His speed is game-changing on screens and swing passes. He's electric, man. There's no denying it. He was great in the receiving game for Georgia. He was awesome last year when they called his number in the receiving game. But because of pass blocking and maybe a little bit of veteran bias, and the fact that he wasn't that bad in the pass game with Devin Singletary, like Singletary still saw a ton of pass downs snaps last year. 437 for Singletary, 155 for James Cook. Both played all 18 games for this team. So that's going to be different this year. You look at the backups, Damian Harris, Latavius Murray, not much of a threat in the receiving game at all. So it's a big year for James Cook, a second-round pick last year, has a ton of potential to be a legit difference-making pass catcher out of the backfield. And they'll use these guys in the passing game too. Their running backs had 78 receptions for over 600 yards last year. Over half of those were Devin Singletary's. So, he's going to be a productive pass catcher and a pretty productive runner, as we'll see shortly. Any sort of PPR formats, he should have a hell of a year. And especially with Nyheim Hines getting hurt. Hines may have chopped into those receiving downs snaps quite a bit if he was on this team, because he's himself one of the 5 or 10 best receiving backs in the NFL. But with him going on IR, there's a real opportunity for James Cook to be kind of like an Austin Eckler, even a better version of Austin Eckler in this NFL. And as we know, that's a legit weapon. So definitely going to be exciting to see what he can do, especially in the receiving game. But that rounds out your group of weaponry. Again, ranking 10th in the NFL. You got your elite guy, and then you got a bunch of different options. None of them, though, have proven to be awesome options other than Stephon Diggs, but there's plenty of optimism for a couple different pieces. So I like the room. Should be super explosive, and obviously not really any questions about the passing game for the Bills. I don't think any of you really came into this video expecting that. But maybe a little bit more here as we talk about the run game a little bit more. So despite all the good things we said about James Cook in the passing game, it's a very polarizing conversation. He's not as proven in the run game. They were able to use him in very advantageous situations last year against light boxes, running very specific runs for him with outside runs and gap runs where they're opening up a lane and just letting him get into space quickly when the defense is unsuspecting. And, if he's in those kind of runs, yeah, he's freaking awesome at it. That's speed. He's got enough vision. He's got a great jump cut. That's not the question with him. With James Cook, it's like, is he really a early downs back that can run inside zone and run with patience and press the line of scrimmage and have that high-end vision and fight for tough yardage and hold up health-wise with that sort of workload? And do you want to give him that kind of workload and risk losing him in the receiving game when you've already lost Nyheim Hines, So that's where it's like, how often is James Cook truly going to be out there on the field? And we saw that play out last year with a guy even in Devin Singletary, who's a good back, but not like an insanely good back. So I am much more skeptical in terms of how much rushing production James Cook is going to have and just how good he's going to be as a running back, as a full-pledged runner. Like I said, there's no doubt in the runs that they were able to get him going on last year, he was incredibly explosive. So that's all why they bring in a guy like Damian Harris, someone that maybe won't threaten his reps so much in the passing game, but brings more size than a guy like Devin Singletary ever had here. Harris is a no-nonsense, big-bodied downhill runner, has been a really efficient, good back for the New England Patriots. Probably underpaid for how good he is. The Bills were smart to jump on him quickly in free agency because I really think he's going to have a good year on the ground. I would be honestly surprised if he doesn't end the year with more rushing yards, touchdowns, attempts than James Cook by a pretty healthy margin. And he's a guy that when they get into January, he might be a little bit more of an answer for actually having more of a physical element in the run game other than Josh Allen running the football. This is a cold weather football team that has to play playoff games in Buffalo. We saw this against the Bengals last year. They just could not move the ball on the ground last year. And James Cook, by the way, was not good in that game. Just 5 carries for 13 yards. And Damian Harris is really the perfect guy to give them more of that power presence in these difficult playoff games. And something that they really, I mean, Singletary's a really nice back, underrated at times, but at his size, he's not a physically imposing back in the way that Damian Harris can be for this team. So I really like this signing. It's nothing crazy. You know, the Bills still rank 26th at running back. There's a lot of great running back rooms in the league. Case in point, Damian Harris hits the market and gets paid nothing. So I think they're in a pretty good spot. And then they also bring in Latavius Murray, who's kind of a tuned down version of Damian Harris in terms of the size and the downhill running. It's a pretty straightforward running back room. You got your big-bodied bruiser, you got your scat back. Should be a healthy rotation. Hopefully this offensive staff can really use them correctly and find the right balance, which is easier said than done. But the runway is there for this to be a really good complementary group here. But you also got to talk about the multiplier you get from Josh Allen in the run game. He changes the numbers about as well as anybody in the league. He's tied for 3rd in the NFL in terms of quarterbacks that help out the run game. It's a 6% multiplier to the total run game score. And they do everything with him. QB power, read option, the QB sneaks. They'll just do like straight up play action, not even play action, just naked runs where they're faking a handoff outside zone, and it's just Josh Allen on the backside just running the ball. No receivers really to throw to. Like it's really special what he does. It's really scary, like how similar he is to what Cam Newton was as a runner. Like just some of the stiff arms and the hurdles and the all of it. Like it's just ridiculousness. I would argue Josh Allen, though, is even faster and quicker than Cam Newton ever was, and that's saying a lot. So he's, as I've said, the most physically gifted quarterback in the NFL, maybe before Anthony Richardson just entered the NFL. But he's a legitimate boost to this run game, as we'll see when we show their total run game score in a little bit. But first, we got to talk about the offensive line, and this is my main concern for this offense. Not necessarily that this is going to be a bad offense, but if they run into some trouble, I think this is going to be why. I've actually got them ranked 27th in the NFL in both pass blocking and run blocking. That's good for 28th overall for their offensive line. And there's just a lot of questions here, too many for my liking. From left to right, you've got Deion Dawkins at left tackle. No questions there, right? Stud of a pass blocker, kind of a technician. He's been a rock here. No availability concerns, like really good in pass pro, solid in the run game. Not the most amazing athlete or the strongest tackle in the world, but he's effective in the run game. That's not the concern. You know, he's locked in at left tackle. Left guard, not a huge concern, but maybe a little bit more unproven in Connor McGovern. Last year was his first year as a full-on starter. Was a 3rd-round pick in 2019, so ended up kind of being a year 4 breakout. Got a really nice contract here, I think 3 years, $24 million, so good starting guard money. Again, I'm not worried about it, but a little bit less of a sample size there. Better in pass protection than he is in the run game. But overall, just, he's a good player. You can't go wrong with a Penn State lineman. He's gotten better every year. Solid athlete. Like, they used to use him as a fullback when the offensive line was too good to get him on the field. And that's another feather in his cap, is there just hasn't been a ton of opportunity for him with guys like Connor Williams and Zach Martin ahead of him. So Williams leaves. McGovern stepped in, played really well, gets the big contract. Should be full go there at left guard. Don't know that you're getting an all-pro guy or anything like that, but should be pretty good. Mitch Morsett's center is a good center, a top half of the league starter. He is on the wrong side of 30 now. The regression has shown up year by year. Never this incredible athlete to begin with, but obviously a great technician at this stage in his career. He still is a good anchor. He's still really good on pull blocks. He's not quite as good at like driving people off the ball on inside zone and stuff, but a good center, though an older one. So from center to left tackle, you feel pretty good. Like, that's definitely not the concern, though there's nothing really elite there either. But at right guard and right tackle, this might decide if this can be a Super Bowl offense or not, is how good these two young offensive linemen play on the right side of the line. O'Cyrus Torrence at right guard and Spencer Brown at right tackle. And O'Cyrus Torrence, I would bet on him to be pretty good. I really liked him. He was pretty easily my number one true guard in this class. I had John Michael Schmitz, my number one interior offensive lineman, but as far as guards are concerned, and especially in kind of a head-up blocking scheme like this, I love O'Cyrus Torrence. Really didn't understand why Steve Avila went ahead of him. I think Tippmann went ahead of him too to the Jets. And to get Torrence at the end of the second round was insane for this Bills team. Felt like they needed a steal like that for this offensive line, and I think they got it. I think I had been mocking Torrence at times in the first round to the Bills, so I really like this fit, but he is unproven talent, and if there's a reason he fell, it's probably because he's not the most polished pass protector. He's a little bit more clunky with his feet. Some quicker interior guys might be able to get through him, and again, just unproven second-round offensive line talent. You're going to be a little bit hesitant on that, but I feel really good, especially about what he's going to do in the run game. Such a mauler there. He's just a moving refrigerator with the right mentality that you look for. That's really where I didn't understand the Steve Avila thing. Avila was a slightly better athlete, but Torrence at least got off the ball and wanted to run block people, unlike Avila. So really like this pick. It's just more of a matter of how many rookie bumps does he endure. But then at right tackle, Spencer Brown, I'm not trying to be overly dramatic here, but I mean, he's up there, take quarterbacks out of the equation. He's up there in terms of the biggest, wild card players for any team in the league. He's a year 3 offensive tackle, a 3rd round pick out of UNI in 2021. And he's been nothing short of a turnstile in pass protection for this Bills team. But they've stuck with him because he has insane athletic tools. I think they obviously believe in him to get better. He has the potential to be a franchise tackle, but is it worth gambling on that in such an important potential playoff, Super Bowl type of year for the Bills? I want to be optimistic that a Northern Iowa guy that has these traits and is aggressive and has the right mentality for the position, I want to believe that he can figure things out. And as the year went on last year, started to have some better games, felt like he was handling some high-end pass rushers a little bit better, started to say, okay, it's maybe there's a chance there, but man, it's still really bad. He just can't connect consistently with his hands. His feet, his footwork are just still late in year 2, still just all over the place. I want to give this team the benefit of the doubt, and I'm trying to be patient with offensive line development that can take 2 to 3 years to get there. But I can just already picture it's divisional round against the Bengals, and Trey Hendrickson or Jalen Phillips are just taking Spencer Brown to the shed, and Josh Allen is running for his life trying to put the team on his back. And I am worried about that. He has got to improve. And what's even more scary is right now, they don't even have another option. All their interior pieces are true interior guys. There's not really a swingman guy that would step outside. They have an unproven talent in Ryan Van Demark. Now, they just had Jermaine Ifedi in for a visit, and I'm going to anticipate that they sign him, and, that would at least provide an option I would say week 9, if Spencer Brown's been a problem for them, they could finally say, okay, Jermaine, you're in. And Jermaine Ifedi is fine depth. He's actually been okay when he's played the last couple of years, so I would like that signing, and I'm expecting it to happen again, because they just cut David Kessenberry, who's been more of a run blocker than a pass protector for them. But yeah, man, it's a potential eyesore. Now, the interior depth is good. You have Ryan Bates, who honestly I think they would have been just fine starting at right guard if a guy like O'Cyrus Torrence wasn't available in the second round and didn't win this job. Bates was fine. He's not the most athletically gifted or strongest lineman, but as swing depth on the inside, feel very good about that. David Edwards is interesting too. You love that he made this team, but he's one of these guys that was pretty solid and then just had a dramatic fall off out of nowhere paired with an injury. So you don't necessarily know what you're getting from David Edwards, but again, he is their second guy in if anything bad happens, so you don't need him to be what he used to be. And then Alec Anderson, undrafted talent, I would assume in year 2 made the team, so we'll see if he plays. But you're solid to good from center to left tackle. Right guard should be pretty good, and then right tackle is like, God, who the hell knows what you're going to get from Spencer Brown. And that's a massive question that pushes this offensive line down in the rankings. They end up getting, a 75 grade in both pass blocking and run blocking. So it's kind of in that mid tier, even if they're at the bottom of that mid tier for both pass blocking and run blocking. It's not like a guaranteed liability, but it's certainly a non-strength and a potential liability. It's not enough to take away from what this offense is going to be able to accomplish. They rank, for me, as the 4th overall offense, 3rd in passing game with the elite quarterback and great weaponry, pretty good coaching, and then 13th in run game. You got a quarterback that can change the numbers in the run game and run for 750 yards himself. Doesn't matter if you're towards the bottom of the league in run blocking and running backs. You're still going to be a pretty effective run game, and that's where they come in there at 13th. So this offense should be humming, and if Spencer Brown can figure things out and Ken Dorsey can have a good, solid year as a coordinator, and maybe some of these receiving weapons take a slight step up, like this could easily be the best offense in the NFL, and that is why they're a top 5 team in the league and why they are still absolute Super Bowl contenders, even if some of the luster on this team has started to fall off a little bit. But I will say I'm not as confident in this defense. Let's get into it, especially with this defensive line. I just don't have a very good feeling about this group. They rank 25th for me in pass rush, 20th in D-line run defense, 24th overall for defensive line. And I don't think we've talked enough over the course of this summer about the fact that Von Miller is 34 and a half years old, coming off a midseason ACL tear, his 2nd career ACL injury, and you could feel how much they missed his presence on the field when he got hurt. And he's going to start the season on the PUP list. That's really concerning. I mean, this team saw how long it took a guy like Tre'Davious White to get back healthy. It could be even worse with Von Miller. Like, there's not a guarantee that we even see Von Miller play this year. That's a pessimistic outlook. But even if he does play, is he the Von Miller that we know? I mean, we know how important bend is to his game. That's kind of what he's always been known for. Granted, he's become much more of a power rusher in recent years, but is that get off the same coming off an ACL injury? He is talk about Spencer Brown being a wild card. Von Miller is the same thing off the edge of the pass rush. Like, you take him out of the mix, and I think there's a chance that he barely plays for this team, at least in the regular season. And you look at the rest of this group, and it is the definition of mid. Not bad necessarily, but definitely mid. I mean, so let's start with the edge. Greg Rousseau, who he's kind of your hope that if this can be without Von Miller, if this is going to be a top 20 pass rush in the NFL, Greg Rousseau is your hope. He's gotten better both years. I'm a Greg Rousseau guy. I always have been. Big, lengthy guy, good get off, good power. Still, though, kind of trying to put the whole picture together. The week-to-week consistencies ebbed and flowed a little bit. If he's your number 2, getting better, opposite of Von Miller, you're thrilled with that. But now that he has to step up and be this team's number 1 presence off the edge, it's, again, just like, okay, I wish we had better than that, Like I said, though, gotten better from college to first year to second year. If that growth continues and he still has a mentor in Von Miller, there's a chance where he can be closer to a number one. Maybe something like a Josh Allen where he can get you 65 pressures, 12 sacks. Maybe. There's a world, but development isn't always linear like that. Very good run defender. I like Greg Rousseau a lot, but he's the best they got because they bring in Leonard Floyd. Floyd's a good cleanup guy. He's really good for stunts, which they run a lot of. He's loopy, he's bendy, he's lanky, he's athletic. He's got some pass rush moves. He's fine as like a low-end number 2. Again, okay. I wish he was my number 3 with Von Miller in there. And then you got some solid rotational pieces. AJ Epinesa, who's still kind of trying to figure things out. He's had some nice games. Not the most athletic guy, but a variety of ways to win as a pass rusher. He defends the run relatively well. He's a solid piece. Not a game changer, though. Shaq Lawson, really good run defender. Love him for that, but not much of a pass rusher. And then Kingsley Jonathan makes the team. Not expecting anything from him, really. But, yeah, I mean, it's a okay edge group without Von Miller. Now you put Von Miller in and push all these guys down. This is not the 25th best pass rush in the NFL. But, again, we have major questions on when we see Von Miller and how good he actually is when he gets on the field. He's going to be 35 years old when this season's over. But then you have your interior group. And, again, it's good group. Nothing crazy, though. I mean, Ed Oliver, I love Ed Oliver. I think he's got some games where he's unblockable, but over a quarter of his pressures last year and 20% of his sacks came in one game against Minnesota, who had Ed Ingram, right? Like, where the hell does Ed Ingram go 3/4 of the time? I couldn't tell you. He is undersized. I think his play strength in a lot of matchups, it just holds him back. And they give him a big contract extension. He can be a disruptive pass rusher. And I would love to see Sean McDermott get really creative with Ed Oliver on stunts because he is a great stunt man. He can be a blow-up guy, a disruptor to create an open rush lane for Leonard Floyd. Likewise, he can loop and twist really well with his crazy athleticism. I mean, get creative by putting him on the edge. Like, let's elevate Ed Oliver's game a little bit here so he's not just running into double teams in a brick wall. It hasn't really been the case, though, with this defensive staff. And that lack of size hurts him a lot of times in run defense, too, where he's very game-to-game there, depending on the blocking schemes that he's facing and how many kind of down blocks and double teams he ends up seeing. Like, if he's defending wide zone runs, his athleticism works great. But if he's facing a duo block against inside zone or a moving, down blocking tackle is going to just wash him out of the play. So very scheme-dependent run defender there. Ultimately, he's a fun player. Probably got slightly overpaid with that contract based on what he's done to this point in time. And without a Von Miller in this group, I do think ultimately he leaves a little bit to be desired. You got Daquan Jones, good all-around player. Love his run defense. They really felt it when he was gone. He's a better pass rusher than you would expect for a late-round defensive tackle in his 30s with a 5.3, 5.40 time, but he's got some good moves. He can be effective there, but again, nothing overly consistent that you're worried about. You go to the depth. You got Tim Settle. I like Tim Settle, but I've been waiting for a breakout for a long time. At this point, he's just good rotational depth, a big body, a solid run defender, adequate replacement level pass rusher on the inside there. I do like the Poona Ford signing. Another smaller guy who had a down year last year for Seattle, but a really instinctive guy, great pad level, really fun player, excellent fourth defensive tackle to have, and can be a disruptive pass rusher as a part of this rotation. And then you got Jordan Phillips, who's just kind of a steamrolling bull rusher and not a whole lot else. He's huge, but has rare get-off at his size, so if pointed in the right direction, he can be a weapon as a pass rusher at times. But, it's great that they have 9 deep of solid players, but you can single team all these guys and you're going to have pretty good win rates against all of them at the end of the day. Minus Greg Rousseau if he continues to get better. So They desperately need Von Miller to get back out there. I think I had them as the 13th pass rush with him coming into the year last year. I think that's much more realistic at the end of the year if you can get Von playing like he did last year. But to be honest, I would bet against that. And I'm not trying to be overly negative here, but the tone does change when you're talking about a top 5 team. And I don't think this is a championship caliber defensive line right here at this point in time. Just got to get Von back. Got to get him back, man. It's so important. Let's talk about the linebackers. I feel better about this group. Matt Milano's just freaking awesome, man. I had so much fun watching him play. He's just genuinely one of the smartest linebackers in the league, a Boston College guy. His just instincts and an ability to be a step ahead of the play in a way that a lot of linebackers aren't probably doesn't get emaugh credit for that. Whether you want to talk about him being underpaid relative to the linebacker market, he gets paid half of what Tremaine Edmunds got, and he's a better player. I at least right now, I don't think it's all that close. And he's so good in coverage. He reads the quarterback's eyes super well. He flows in the intermediate game with routes. He just is a really good all-around linebacker. Not the fastest player, not the biggest guy. There's going to be some games where the run defense is not quite what you want to see. There can be times where he doesn't have Tremaine Edmunds' traits in coverage, but for the most part, man, he's a total stud in both phases, is a huge reason why the Bills still, for me, rank 7th in linebacker coverage, 21st for run defense, 15th for overall linebackers, because the LB2 spot is completely up in the air at this point in time. It's really between 2 third-round linebackers. So there's potential, but unproven potential there in Terrell Bernard, last year's third-round pick, and Dorian Williams, this year's third-round pick. Now, I definitely thought Dorian Williams was the better prospect, but Bernard has the advantage of a year in this system and in the NFL to get used to the speed of the game there. So they're going with Bernard. They like him. I think they've earned the benefit of the doubt with this linebacker position, but just entirely unproven, right? He's a little bit undersized, not the fastest guy with being undersized. Does that sound familiar? Like what we just talked about with Matt Milano? Yeah, it's similar. He's got great instincts, and there's a chance that he can transcend a slight lack of physical traits. But if he doesn't, you've got a chance at Dorian Williams, who I think there's a decent world where we see Dorian Williams in the second half of the year, and I was a big fan, man. His speed is real. He is a headhunter of a linebacker. He's ultra aggressive, which does put him out of position a lot of the times. But it's nice to have a compliment in a guy like Matt Milano. Perfect linebacker to take a mid-round flyer on. Not necessarily someone that you would expect to play great right away, though, but someone that in time could become a plus linebacker. But this is a guy that I had a high-end comp of Deion Jones on. I see some similarities in his game. So a fun prospect. Don't know how much we see from him last year, but definitely someone to keep an eye on. And then you got some veteran options, guys like Terrell Dotson, Tyler Matakevich. If Bernard's a complete colossal disaster, Dotson's played a little bit. They've gotten by with him. Tyler Matakevich has played a little bit. Okay. They got another prospect there in Braylon Spector. Another guy that's not the biggest, fastest, or strongest guy, but a heady player. So, they're keeping a couple extra linebackers here to really make sure they can figure this out by season's end. But they might have some hiccups there with the LB2 spot, but you don't have any questions about what Matt Milano is, at least. So makes sense why they're pretty middle of the road. They have a really good linebacker and then some questions with potential answers at LB2. Ultimately not too worried about it, though. Then you get to the secondary. This is the best part of this defense, really by far. And if they end up with a top half of the league defense, I think this is the group you can thank. Not to say they don't have questions, but I do have them ranked as a top 5 secondary. Exactly that, 5th. So you got Tre'Davious White, full season of health for him, and it has been a while since we got to see that kind of top 3 or 5 corner version of Tre'Davious White, but I think it's still in there. I see him as a superstar corner. His fluid hips, his just high IQ ability to play this system. I mean, he's in the perfect scheme fit. I mean, think about some of the things we've said about guys like DJ Reed or Darius Williams, guys that are, maybe a little bit smaller for the cornerback position, maybe not even the fastest players at the cornerback position, but in an off-zone, quarters-heavy system, you get a guy with fluid hips, incredible, high IQ, good ball skills. It's a great fit for Trey White. So I'm expecting full health from him and almost like a bounce-back year to kind of be a top 5 corner or so, even if it's been a little bit since we saw that. And even last year when he came back, he was really good, but maybe not necessarily the elite guy that he once was. But you're not worried about him. In fact, you're thrilled that you get to start the year with him this time. And then you're also going to start the year this time with Kaiir Elam as a starter, it looks like, which is really good news. They spent a first-round pick on Kaiir Elam and had a lot of expectations for him. Now, Elam was a guy that basically just played a lot of press man at Florida, and I think, I'm only speculating here, but I think his inability to kind of get on the field early last year probably had a lot to do with the fear of him busting coverages and understanding the pattern matching rules and all that stuff. You definitely got to be a thinker of a corner to play in this system, and that maybe just took some time for him in a way that guys like Christian Benford and Dane Jackson were able to handle those things a little bit better. But if things have clicked for him, his physical tools are outstanding. He has great speed. He's physical. He's someone that can be their press guy. We've seen this a lot more from these kind of quarters Fangio style schemes where they'll put one guy up in the face of an outside wide receiver and jam them and have the other corner be more of that off-zone guy, and that could be Kaiir Elam here for sure. He was a first-round pick for good reason. He has great upside, and it's good to see him win this job, and it seems that the arrow is pointing back up on Kaiir Elam after a really rocky rookie season, but it happens. It's a tough cornerback position, right? He's not a perfect player, but there's definitely a world where he becomes a good number 2 corner. You know who he reminds me a lot of is Michael Davis for the Chargers, who's been a really good press corner in a similar system with Trey White kind of being their Asante Samuel. So there's a lot of parallels there with the Chargers secondary. And then you've got really one of the best slot corners in the NFL in Teron Johnson. He's a true slot. You don't really want him stepping outside. He's lacks some of those outside corner traits with the size and the speed, but really heady dude. He is physical. He has splash plays against the run, though he does miss a few too many tackles, and because they ask a lot of him, he can get, matched up on good run blocking tight ends and stuff and get drowned out. But from a coverage perspective, he's as good as you can ask for from a slot corner. So the cornerback trio alone there has a chance to really be one of the best in the league. And that's a really nice starting point. But you have good cornerback depth as well. You have Dane Jackson, who I was curious. I was kind of happy that the Bills were a later deep dive here to kind of see how this competition played out. And maybe it's still playing out. Because I was curious who was going to win that CB2 job. Because Dane Jackson was definitely better than Kaiir Elam last year. And he's a really fun, quick, physical, smart player. Just isn't the fastest guy, isn't the biggest guy. So he's got some more physical limitations, but he had some really fun tape. If any of these guys go down, you can play Dane Jackson in any of these roles. I think he can play physical man coverage and do what Kaiir Elam is being asked to do. He can play off zone like Trey White. He can play in the slot. As a fourth corner, he's one of the best fourth corners in the NFL at this point in time, and you love that. Christian Benford as well, surprised by being the day one starter. Now, his season kind of tapered off, dealt with some injuries, did get targeted, gave up some yards. You're not going to pound the table and say he's a future superstar or anything, but as a fifth corner, he's got experience, a young player. And then Cam Lewis, more of a special teamer, hanging out there as CB6. But it's not just the corners. You still have this safety duo that theoretically is the best safety duo in the NFL. This is another pretty major wild card for this team, which this team has a lot of those. You got right tackle, you got these safeties here, both old and one coming off a serious injury in Micah Hyde. And then you got Von Miller. Like, if those things all go wrong, the Bills might be in trouble of even making the playoffs this year. But there's another world where Micah Hyde is just fine coming off the injury. He's 32 years old, has pretty consistently been one of the 5 to 10 best safeties in the NFL before the injury. So it's really just a matter of, health and regression at his age and how much does it hit. But a former slot corner himself, he's the perfect hybrid quarters pattern matching safety where he can flip and convert into man coverage vertically, incredibly with it mentally. So you're hopeful that he can get back to his old self. And then Jordan Poyer as well, getting up there in age. He's also 32 years old. Dealt with some dings and bumps last year. I'm less worried about Poyer than I am Micah Hyde, but you did see Poyer get paid a relatively small contract for his play. The league is clearly a little bit worried that he's trending down as well, and that's eventually going to happen. He's 32 years old. They've kind of played with fire, not investing a ton in a high-end replacement for these two guys, and you just hope that that doesn't come to fruition. And if it doesn't, you're rounding out easily one of the best secondaries in the league. But you can definitely see where between those safeties and Kyer Elam, you have some questions for a top 5 secondary. And then they also, by the way, bring in Taylor Rapp. And this was a smart signing early in the offseason. Micah Hyde, you didn't know necessarily what his situation was going to be. Damar Hamlin, obviously, and his situation. Rapp has been a really solid safety for the Rams, really good around the line of scrimmage. So I do think they use a lot of 3 safety packages this year to kind of compensate a little bit for that LB2 spot not being as good. This has been a true nickel defense all the time when they can with those 2 linebackers with Edmonds and Milano in recent years. I think that's going to change a little bit. I think they're going to get into a lot more dime with Milano as the only linebacker out there, but Rapp has the physicality to shut down any sort of trap or draw or screen the teams want to throw at lighter fronts. So you love that. He's a really heady safety, has played in a very similar system with the Rams. Very athletically limited. He's got 4.6 speed as a safety. His coverage range and consistency on the back end isn't going to be great if you have to turn to him as a deep safety and a starter. But kind of playing that Jaron Curse role, I think he could have a really nice year here for the Bills. And then you got Damar Hamlin. And comeback player of the year, just give him the award. I mean, how good does it feel to just be sitting here and he made the team? He's going to get to continue his NFL career and his life. Now, I hate to say a bad word about the guy because it's such a good feel-good story, but, he's fine. I was really paying attention to him as I was getting through Bills tape because I just enjoyed seeing him play football again. Rewatching the tapes before the whole situation, I was like, ooh, yeah, there's still a lot to clean up there. Some rough reps as a deep safety, a lot of missed tackles, good backup safety. I like him in that role, but if you had to turn to him, maybe he has completely changed as a player after everything that happened, and that'd be the best thing in the world if he becomes the next Jordan Poyer. But, the tape is the tape, and I don't feel great about him starting, logistically speaking. I mean, mentally, I love it, but you know what I'm saying. And then Ciaran Neal, special teamer, kind of dime, slot corner, big-bodied guy, hybrid defensive back. Hasn't been much of an impact for them over the years, but he's still here. So really good secondary, though a couple questions. I would say this has the potential, though, if Elam hits and these safeties can stay healthy and play close to their peak form, that this could be the best secondary in the NFL, and that could be enough to, make this a good defense. I'm skeptical that this could be a great defense. I mean, if everything goes right, if Von Miller gets back to his old self and the things with the secondary come together and the LB2 spot hits with one of those third-round guys, there's still a lot of talent here. It could be a top 10 defense, but that's a lot of stuff to go right. Right now, I have them projecting as the 17th best defense, 16th in pass defense, 26th against the run, though. I still think they're a little bit squishy up in the front there. They lost a lot of physically imposing ability there with not just Tremaine Edmonds, but Von Miller was their best run defender off the edge last year, too. So ultimately, I really think there's a good chance that this offense is going to have to do a lot of the heavy lifting here. You're hoping for an average defense and one of the 3 best offenses in the NFL, and that can win a Super Bowl. Like I know I've had some negative undertones here, but I still think this is a team that very realistically could make that big push this year. Their special teams, by the way, rank right in the middle of the league as a good special teams. They bring the special teams guys back, the kicker and the punter, which were good with Bass and Sam Martin. Would love to see maybe like Deontay Hardy get some return snaps. That'd be fun, but Nyheim Hines getting hurt is not ideal. It's a great return man, but anyway, they're good special teams. Not worried about them there. As we look at their strengths and weaknesses, a lot of it's obviously going to center around the offense, and you got a super weapon at quarterback. You know, the things Josh Allen is able to do are just absurd, and he's why you feel like you could have the number 1 offense in the NFL with good pieces around him, with good weaponry, which is a strength for this team on top of having a super weapon at quarterback. So, you know, that's what brings this team up into the top 5 ultimately, but I think there's a pretty good chance secondary is a strength, though there's parts of the secondary you can list down there as questions, but I'm pretty optimistic that they can get things right back there and at least raise the floor of this defense in the passing game. But other weaknesses and questions, the right side of the offensive line is a huge swing factor in terms of can this be the offense that they need them to be, with Spencer Brown and Osiris Torrance really going to have to step up for the offense. And then the pass rush. It's you know, Von Miller is such a huge wild card for this defense, as we've said. So let's wrap up with this team's schedule. It is the Buffalo Bills. The market and the general NFL fandom at large, I guess, love the Bills. So not a surprise that their over-under is the highest we've seen yet at 10.5. And their schedule's not easy, man. They got to play their division, which we know is a gauntlet. We just revealed the Jets and the Dolphins at the 7 and 8 spot in this series. I mean, just splitting against their own division is going to be difficult, though very doable. They are, in theory, the better team than those guys, the more proven team. They have to play the NFC East, which we know is the more difficult of the NFC divisions, with Dallas and Philadelphia. Those will not be easy games. They've got the Brian Dable revenge game as well that's very familiar with this defense. So that won't be easy, though they should be pretty sizable favorites there. And then you have the AFC West with Justin Herbert and that guy named Patrick Mahomes. Who knows what the Broncos are going to be this year? You got to play the Jags in London. You got to go to Cincinnati, too, by the way. That's your AFC North draw. All these AFC East teams have just an absolute gauntlet, and it's not that this Bills team can't get to 11 wins, but I'd feel much better about this over-under if it was 10 wins or 9.5 wins. There's a pretty solid chance this team settles in at like 10 wins. And because all these teams are going to beat up on each other, they're rightfully the favorites to win this division. I don't love that price at minus 120. I think all these teams should be, or at least the Bills, the Dolphins. I got Patriots fans excited for a second, but the Dolphins, the Bills, and the Jets, I think should all be relatively close, something like plus 130, plus 140. So I don't think there's a ton of value there. I don't see a ton of value on the Super Bowl at plus 725. The AFC is going to be just such a freaking gauntlet and a bit of a coin toss. So in terms of like market value betting on the Bills, I don't fully see it. But I will, in a week when I finish the deep dive series, I will put my money where my mouth is and put my final official record predictions out there for every team. We'll see where I ultimately come in on the Bills. I think it'll be either 10 or 11 wins, but no guarantees there. We'll see. definitely make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss that in about a week. That's all we've got for this Bills deep dive. I really hope you guys enjoyed. Bills fans, good luck. I know last year was a rough one with those expectations, but hopefully a couple things go right. And if they do, this team should be right back in the mix. But I hope you guys enjoyed. Please hit that like button on the way out. Make sure you drop your predictions down below for who the next 4 are going to be. Again, we got a free giveaway t-shirt for whoever gets that right first. And yeah, we're out of here. We'll see you in a couple days for the next deep dive. Peace out.